Cool. All right. Yep. Like Brian said, I'm Ben. I'm a software engineer at Lumeris with him. We're a healthcare analytics company. I'll dive right in, I guess. So maybe this is inflammatory, and I'm sorry. I didn't realize if there's a bunch of VM people in the room, you can chew my guts out. But the reason if being full stack devs, I think a lot of you want to concentrate on the software rather than the hardware, which is the point of AWS. But what if you don't even have to provision your own EC2 VMs? After going through this project, I realized I'm loving it. The primary driver is a cost reduction, right? Even a micro, even running a shitty T2 micro is going to run you at least $8 a month in terms of the hour. If you keep it on as a web server to host your web application, it's ultimately, and yeah, $8 a month, whatever. But when you can do it for an eighth of that and have instantaneous scalability that you don't have to configure, I believe you'll see that serverless, the cost saving, the scalability, also the administration, right? Like, how do you either have to configure something? How do I make sure this host is still responding to requests? Regardless of how brilliant a solution you come up with, there's still some level of administration that takes place inside of EC2 when you're running hosts in Amazon. And then finally, effort and speed. I find that using AWS Lambda to execute server-side code is, particularly using Node to do that, all of a sudden you'll start flying through the CRUD, create up, insert, update, delete, whatever. You'll realize your backend gets infinitely scalable because you're basically running Docker containers on their managed servers, and that you can get through a web app a lot quicker than had you had to set up a back-end service yourself. So those are my primary reasons that I see of going serverless. So, all right. So yeah, the solution to these problems is to delegate to AWS. S3, host your HTML and your JS content. Hey guys, sorry. We're just getting started. Briefly, why go serverless? Cost, much less cost, much less administration, and then velocity, dev velocity. So the general solution in AWS is use the S3 file system to host your HTML and JavaScript. Route 53, Route 53 is one of my favorite parts of AWS. The ability, free certs and a $12 domain is awesome. I can't get over that. I do love how easy they've made domain purchase and cert management. So big plug for Route 53. CloudFront sits in front of your S3 data and fronts it as a fake host, but basically lets you utilize your domain even though it's just an S3 file behind that. API Gateway lets your app connect and invoke the Lambda server-side code that you're going to need to run against your data store. For me, I use an NPM library called S3DB. A lot of people use Dynamo. I realize in retrospect that I probably should have used Dynamo, but whatever you're using as a database, API Gateway is the tool to invoking Lambda and fetching your data for clients. All right. So yeah, again, all the stuff I'm going to show you today comes straight from the AWS Labs GitHub team. Like that was my jumping off point because they're real good and easy to follow. So S3 Cognito for identity access management. The API Gateway invokes the Lambda, and Lambda is my far and away my favorite AWS service right now. The fact that they bill you at the 100 millisecond interval is pretty sweet. So if API Gateway calls your code and it runs for 1100 milliseconds, you get, or 1059 milliseconds, you get billed at 1100 milliseconds, and that I have yet to be charged after a couple thousand seconds of runtime. I've yet to be charged a cent by AWS for Lambda. You get like 400,000 free seconds of compute time. So I highly recommend it. It's cool, easy to play with, and easy to debug in the console itself. So yeah, solving the cost problem. So and I'll show you guys the app as we get closer to the end, but this doesn't render great, but my bill was $1.12 for this August. So 24 cents of that went against the API gateway. You know, like I said, Lambda for 4,000 seconds of running was free. Those you pay both for the time and the number of times the function gets invoked. Really, paying 50 cents for hosting a private DNS zone in Route 53 is the bulk of your cost. So yeah, you can host your own web app for about $1 a month in AWS. So liking that. Yeah, you should. Yeah, and then what's better, right? No EC2, no patching, no auto. I mean, to those of you that have messed with auto scaling in AWS, I find that to be one of the biggest farces that there is out there. I mean, getting things to respond the way the connection between auto scaling groups and the CloudWatch triggers that invoke those is dubious, and for everybody, to scale in the cloud, that is by far the hardest part that I've had in AWS, is getting things in EC2 to scale correctly. So just get rid of that shit. Don't mess with it. Let Lambda invoke every time. Let Lambda execute every time it's invoked. No VPC, no subnets, none of that bullshit. Your attack surface is limited because all your security is scoped around API gateway to Lambda, and then from Lambda to whatever database service you want to use, or in my case, S3 is a database service. So scoping security, because that shit gets out of control quick. I mean, at our company, it's gotten out of control, and we're starting to rein it back in. But logging, oh fuck yeah, Lambda auto logging is awesome. If you've used CloudWatch before, the fact that every invocation will auto log to CloudWatch for you, and again, we'll go through all this in the end through the console. The auto logging to CloudWatch, awesome. And then I firmly believe anything you dev in AWS has to be deployed through CloudFormation. That you can't hand code resources in the console itself. You need a utility to build these things consistently. And I find that this pattern, the CloudFormation, to do that is considerably easier than making a VPC and subnets and EC2 instances inside an auto-scaling group. So, administration, check. Increasing your dev velocity. Node.js lets you go quickly. Ultimately, all you're doing is you're going to write these node functions for Lambda, zip them, ship them to S3, and your CF will reference the directory in S3 where you've shipped these, and your functions are ready to rock. And then test through the UI is pretty simple. And then the gateway native integration with Lambda. Again, you can just sit in API gateway and run parameters through until you get the response that you want, and then save your function in that form. So
and is that all JSON?
It is. Well, I mean, it is JSON behind the scenes, but obviously in the UI, right? They put a nice wrapper on it so that it's we'll get to that. We'll get to it. And then from the front end, because S3 is your web server, it's real easy to deploy here too. You just bundle up your index HTML. It does require that you're working with a client-side JavaScript app framework, Angular, React being the popular ones. I'm sorry. So Brian and I are back-end people. Do not judge my application on the HTML on the design, because I will be upfront with you. Front-end React. This was just for me playing. That's not my strong suit. That's not what I do on a day-to-day basis. So CloudFront makes it easy to tie your fake domain host to your fake API gateway host through the cert management. Otherwise, you're stuck in core as hell, and Chrome will blow up and you'll hate it. So if you're going to do this, you need to go ahead and buy a domain, get your wildcard cert, and roll from that perspective. Star dot whatever your domain ends up being. So yeah, like my implementation is basically just a copy of the labs team serverless serverless application model, and if this is recorded, I can get everybody. My source code is at my GitHub account, and then let's see if this is so. All right. So let me give a little bit of context to this application. I grew up in a small town in southern Missouri. My mother runs the local saddle club, and she wanted a way so that as people horse shows, right? So during these horse shows, as people compete, she needed a way to live update, what place you got and how many points you have for the show, because there's $200, $250 on the line for some of these people, and they take it pretty seriously. So she wanted a simple app that would let her put in scores as they came in, and people can check and see, what their relative rank is. And so I used to manage this in an Excel sheet but again, that wasn't something everybody could look at, and we needed she needed a more globalized solution. So the app itself, and again, it doesn't render right, but not my strong suit. React.js with React Bootstrap primarily driving the panels, in your 12-column setup, and then chart.js for some of the charts. But basically, she enters riders, what their rank was, how many points were tied to that, and at the end has charts that let her say by the age bracket for this show, who had the most, Debbie DePriest won today. So again, not a great app, but not my strong suit, and we'll go to the back end, which is, and that's the more interesting part anyway, to me anyway. So, and again, if you have questions at any point, to stop me, because I'm rambling. Yeah.
All right. So, okay. So walk through us different categories. If you click.
So that's a class, right?
Okay.
Right. So ponies, little kids, right, and then musical poles. These are different competitions that people, show and compete in.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, it's a mystery game. It's kind of like
That's a random one. It's the same 8 events and then one random one. Okay. So that's the basic premise, though. Is that yep. So she just enters as somebody rides. She'll add competitors here and then update their points and rank. So the guts of it is starts with, like I said, Route 53. Purchasing that domain is the first thing you need to do, and you can check. It's easy to check. Like, is this domain available? And if it, after you purchase it, it will. This is the only part you can't do through CloudFormation, because they have to do email verification against. Yes, I accept that I purchased this domain, right? So you end up with a hosted zone, which here is the Gainesville Saddle Club, which is our domain here, GainesvilleSaddleClub.org. So from a Route 53 perspective, your DNS management is achieved through here, and some aliases. So this is the points app, which via CloudFront will help you. So remember I said there's no host, right? But so how the hell does this get resolved? Well, Route 53 has a pointer saying, when you say pointsapp.GainesvilleSaddleClub.org, resolve this CloudFront distribution. So CloudFront. You can see here's a distribution. It is a lot of this bullshit, but basically the. Let me try to remember this. Right. So this is an S3 bucket that's hosting these files.
And in the general tab, it had Canada and the U.S. and something else. So that's.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, this is should your app blow up and become an international sensation, the part of the point of CloudFront is that getting your own host. B, that they run these, they push your S3 distribution, because your bucket's really only in one place, right? In one AZ. But if your app were to blow up, all of a sudden somebody in China wants to look at it. CloudFront has hosts in China, so that when they say Points App, Gainesville Saddle Club, it'll hit one of those Chinese hosts to download the content.
But right now, that wouldn't happen.
I honestly, I don't remember. I think I set the price. It's all tied to the price, right? So yes, I think I left it at the U.S. and that was the default. All I was really trying to get was the abstraction to say, hey, Route 53, when you get a... Now I can't close. I need to drag over, sorry. There. Hey, Route 53, when you get a request to pointsapp.gainesvillesaddleclub.org, that I need you to throw it at that CloudFront distribution. Yeah. So, and again, I'm not super familiar beyond just getting it to work, but basically, the origins defines what bucket holds your content, and yeah. So there's just a bucket here in S3, which is your file system. So when you do a release, all you're doing is I just used the AWS CLI to re-upload over those files that were there, and all of a sudden your CloudFront distribution will. There's a time to live setting. I think I left it at like 60 seconds. That, oh man, this content's changed. It'll re-upload it to their servers, and you're good to go again. Sorry, should have had this pulled up. There we go. Sorry. So, yeah, I just when I'm done working, there's your index HTML, and then React triggers. From there, we can get into the front-end stuff in a little bit. But basically, the S3 bucket gets fronted by CloudFront. Route 53 has the alias over it. Now to how does the data get in here, right? Because here's your screen content. Now where's the data coming from? So API gateway, and again, this is only serverless in the sense that you're renting some space on a common web server for hosting your API. So the general layout here is that you define resources, right? So if your API is made up of competitors, which in my case are the people that are participating in this horse show, you want to build a competitors method, right? And then /ID would be, competitor ID 2, ID 4. So to test this, the resolution kind of sucks, sorry. All right. So it'll say, I ran /competitors 200 status. It took about a second. One of the things about Lambda is if you let your containers get cold, it will. So if we immediately test this again, you'll see that latency drop considerably. Or usually you will. Come on, you piece. All right. Well, whatever. You sit here and bang on it for a while, it will drop. But yep. Here are the writers. Here's your response. When you're actually, so like I said, testing from API Gateway, pretty straightforward. The way that this integrates into Lambda is your integration request. You say integration type, Lambda function. Use Lambda proxy integration. What region, and then what function do you want to call? So if we go open up Lambda, I guess I had it open. So, great thing about Lambda testing in the console, you can write your code. I prefer to do it in whatever your IDE of choice is for JS work, and then upload it. But if you got a bug, it's real easy to figure out what it is here. You can edit it inline, save it, run another test event through, run a test, and get the content that you're looking for.
Do you have common files in this? Like if you have a config.js that has like your credentials
Sure.
and stuff like that,
Yeah.
you can access it from here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now you have to zip and upload it together, but yes, at that point you can reference other files in your project. But yeah, it does need to be zipped and shipped in that example.
And then exports document, where is that just a comment?
Right. So if you look at the Lambda documentation, that all your functions are going to have some handler, and that's Lambda's integration point. That when they run this as a container, I'm looking for that's the function I want.
Okay.
So that's pretty generic, and it's well documented in AWS's Node Lambda documentation that here's how this function is going to get invoked. So these the things that don't change with every invocation, you need to declare outside the scope of that function, and then from that point, this S3DB works purely in futures, so it's a bunch of then catch. But to actually test that, you could just say I'm on Brian's computer, so this will cache what you put in as the test event, but because we're trying to find everybody, this should just No, I think I have to give it some HTTP context, but whatever. Yeah. Here's the JSON behind that, but basically that S3 that database is basically saying get collection competitors, then find everybody, promise all, and then callback. Right, the callback's your important part here. It's basically once you've built your response, return that.
Using a document style database.
Yeah, it is. It treats S3 as if it's a document store. Like I said, realistically, in hindsight, probably best to use just a simple Lambda Dynamo integration would go better. But yep, it is using S3 as if it's a document. It's cheaper than Dynamo, but it is using S3 like a document database.
So I'm not using Lambda, and I've not done this kind of setup, so it's all just like from my understanding of what I've seen here. Lambda is a bunch of separate like independent functions, stuff like that.
Yep.
And so when you're building what is effectively a large application, or like whatever, you're building an application of whatever size.
Yep.
Do you find that you have that application kind of set up on your computer, and then you're transferring it to all those independent things?
So with the back end, it's actually fast. Once you get, like, you saw how easy it was to test here. With the back end, it's actually faster to dev to think, all right, I think this is what the functions need to do. Write one, and then you have the pattern for CRUD in Node, and you can roll through them. Yeah.
Is there a way to set up your IDE to integrate with Lambda without pushing up?
Fair question. I honestly don't know. I have that probably does exist at this point. I haven't been using it, but that could totally exist. But basically, the real thing you have to do with when you're going to invoke this from API Gateway is you do have to build a response object that contains a status code, headers, and a body, right? So when you're building a function that's going to be called through API Gateway, you do have to build they do have a pretty strongly typed response object that you have to conform to. So, right. So here, like I said, after I collect all the promises of all the people, I'm basically just going to put that in the body and then say it was good. Here's what the content is, and then all those JSON objects representing the people, put that in the body and return it. But again, if we look at what that costs, right, it's kind of, this stuff still blows my mind, right? So build direct, your build for 2.6 seconds, right? And I've still yet to have that cost anything. So the 400,000 free seconds that I don't even know if that's a month level or what, but I haven't been charged anything. So I really do like this service. It's pretty cool. And again, real easy to connect to your API gateway. You just say, hey, what function am I going to invoke here? Find all competitors.
So your whole cost is S3.
Yeah. So S3, yeah, it's just S3 and that domain purchase for whatever you want your host to be. Route 53, the initial cost is like $12 for, if you want like a hipster IO domain, it's like $30. But if you want like just .com or .org, whatever, $12 plus 50 cents a month plus your S3 costs, and you're moving on something that, now, like I said, if you were really good, you'd have something that kept your containers hot to keep the response latency low, or you can do caching. You can do, one of the cool features of API gateways, you can do caching so that it doesn't have to go back to the Docker container most of the time in Lambda. That it's as soon as it hits the API layer, you have your response. So, and that's like that gets closer to the EC2 prices because that's an hourly charge of like 2 cents a gigabyte. But yeah, if you were to invoke caching at the front, your refresh speeds would drastically increase. But this was just me seeing how cheap can I possibly go with this thing, and that was as cheap as I could get it to go. What else? So
they're controlling the data, so you can't like cheat it and try to data or something. It's like an external.
exactly, you do ultimately from API gateway. You define what your API is going to look like, right? Here's your get method, and mine's simple. You get and post, for the most part, has been what I've been doing. So you're going to package this and ship it to a stage, which I've dubbed beta, and deploy it under there. And ultimately, you're going to use a custom domain name, api.gainesvillesaddleclub.org, which then points to your destination, which is this stage. So that's how you avoid the cores, is that you're going to front this shared web server with api.gainesvillesaddleclub.org and avoid the cross-origin resource sharing. So
API just maps the endpoints to a specific function.
that's it exactly. In a testable way. But yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not it. It does one other really important thing. It exports a JavaScript SDK that you drop straight into your app, and we can go over that. Let me pull up the front end. Sorry. So these all those backend functions roughly look the same. So you just inject your API-G client in here, and I put this shit in there, but that don't mean nothing. If you scope your security well, yeah, there's a way you can use Cognito, and I should have done, but basically, if you scope that key to only have API gateway permissions, fuck it. It doesn't really, it's not going to kill you. But basically, you can leave your invoke URL pointed at your domain covering your API gateway stage. And at that point, you're going to invoke state.client. Where's our state props? Oh, API-G client factory some shit. It's been a while since I've messed with this. Oh man. basically you can from the stage SDK generation platform So it will produce this API G client for you, and at that point you're ready to you're tied in, you're hooked up. So that's the other important thing it does is it lets your app easily interact, and so yeah, it does do that. And I think by the time I'm saying new client this.state, right, and then I'm just saying this.state.client invoke that API with, for the find all, I don't really have any params. I'm just saying call competitors, add a get with an empty body, because I just want you to tell me everybody who's been writing in these shows. So that, and again, for the other endpoints, they're implemented roughly the same way, right? So competitors ID, get me a specific person, and that ID parm gets passed to the function. So that's the general layout. Questions or?
So is it probably the charging based on the cost, like the function as a service, each function?
Yes.
Yep. The doesn't cost based on the cost they charge for the micro 1 cent for the form.
Yeah, except much less than that, and you do get the 400,000 free off the top. So I don't know if that expires after some point in time. They might raise the prices. To be fair, I don't know, but I can't ever see it being. I can't ever seeing it get so high to justify not doing it. I'd say compared to running any host in the cloud, it's always going to be drastically cheaper.
And so what's the deal with Lambda? Like your code can only run needs to run under 5 minutes.
Right. So no bulk processing. No, I mean, I think some people are starting to approach it now. I'm not exactly sure how, but for the most part, the invocations of your functions are scoped at 5 minutes. You do have this. Let's go look at one of those. You do have context to let you know how long it's been and how many seconds you have left. Yeah. I don't use it because I've never gotten close to hitting that, but.
So there is a way you could possibly dump your data, queue it, and then pick it back up with another processor.
Exactly. Yes, you can do that.
That'd be pretty killer.
Well, yeah. Right, so that context object right here will say, or I don't know, it doesn't tell you how much time you have left, but it does say when I started ticking, when the clock started, and you can figure out, I've got 3 seconds left, oh shit, dump this, re-invoke me, or whatever you want to do. But like I said, all these functions look about the same, and you do one, get it working, and you can just churn through the rest. And each function, by convention, is its own JS file. Yeah, just always building the new database, just building the database object, and then rolling through, finding people, saving stuff.
So if you wanted to write a Lambda function that used a different npm package, can you, is there, it doesn't seem like you have a package JSON. Is there a way that you can,
yeah,
install a package?
Yeah, it's right here. So, yeah. So again, pretty simple. All I said is I just need the SDK and this S3 database library and ship that. So, and then I have just a zip. When I ship, I just run package distro, this little shell script that says ship it to, for me, Lambda Node.js function to that S3 directory, and then CloudFormation. I'm serious about the CloudFormation. Don't hand code this shit. those definitions are fairly straightforward. These YAML functions say this is a Lambda function. Where's the code? Oh, it's in this zip file in this S3 bucket. So you don't even have to hand build the Lambda functions. You just write a CloudFormation is critical to making sure things stay consistent. You don't get drift. What if you accidentally click the button and fuck something up? Like always deploying through CF helps a lot. So
So you gotta push all your dependencies up.
you do. You do have to push your dependencies up. And if you, yeah, that's fair.
There's a lot of node libraries.
Yeah. It's a lot of node libraries that go with it, right? Because it's a container. Like, how else does it know what to do at the point of running? So yes, you npm install and then zip those files with it. And again, I mean, it never gets. It's in the megs. It's in the low megs still, and it's not insignificant, but I haven't found that to be the biggest deal. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So, I guess just one final question. I mean, so what would you say has been like the major pain point in doing this?
I was emphasizing the domain stuff a lot because I was trying to do it originally with just off of S3, and Chrome won't let you do that. It'll say, look, you're trying to, so in API Gateway, you can see that invoke URL, you try to, some bullshit web server you're sharing with 10,000 other people, you're trying to say, wait, jump from S3 to this thing for the API calls? No, man, I'm not going to do that. So then figuring out the Route 53 to one, put a domain in front of your CloudFront, and then two, put a domain in front of API Gateway with your custom domain names. That was my real pain point in terms of actual getting stuck and not having a whole lot of clarity on what to do.
So I know you mentioned that it's not like without some backflips, it's not really great for processing. Are there other? Well, I guess in general, what are the use cases where this is ideal, and what are the ones that are like more importantly not ideal?
Okay, so I think it's suitable for most web applications where the scope of the data, where you're not where you don't expect your server-side code to like open up this table, do this crazy aggregation, like I need you to processing data. Yeah, I don't think it's suitable for that. But if you're light forms, small forms, are reasonable in the kilobytes, I think that's an acceptable use case. So I think, yeah, broadly, a lot of applications. As a data processing right now, there are better services. AWS Batch is one I've been playing with recently that can handle large workloads and scale efficiently and still abstracts a lot of that work away from you. But I would say a lot of, I think it does have applicability to a lot of end-user applications that, like I said, it's not the fastest, but if you want to do it on the cheap, I think it's a very viable way to go. And it's like I said, no administration. I haven't touched this thing in 3 months, I think somewhere around there. It still works. Lambda didn't go away. Like I occasionally, I mean, we can go look at the CloudWatch logging. I'm sorry. We should have done that. So you see, this was us, 724, when we were clicking around. Here's that, and maybe more recently than that. Yeah. In start date times, if you're, I don't generally have it logged too much. Really, just the if there's an exception, what was that exception? Throw that exception into CloudWatch. But yeah, because Lambda scopes your logging group to the function, it's real easy to be like, dude, this isn't working. Just CloudWatch, you're there. What's not working about it? Pretty quick to find. So, and the fact that Lambda does that automatically for you, centralized logging, is I like that a lot.
So if I go home tonight or tomorrow and want to have like a walkthrough recreating a similar setup, is it best to go to the AWS documentation, which I found not the greatest all the time, or are there different resources that kind of explain this?
Man, I'll tell you, it's not the greatest, but it is thorough, right? It's shitty reading, but it it is all in there if you dig long enough. I'll tell you the best resource is their labs team. Their labs team is awesome. So just their labs team's GitHub. This is where I started from. It was their web app, and there's a bunch of readmes, and they kept the front end with the back end in this app, but I chose to separate them because it's easier for me to keep track. But yeah, this app right here this was my jumping point.
As far as negotiating the DNS stuff that you're talking about, is that in here or was that elsewhere?
It is in here, but they call it out in like letters, like, hey, you need to go buy a domain before you do this, right? Because because of the way domain registry works, that's not something you can do through their CF. So they do call that out, that you need to purchase the domain first. So yeah, I would say this is a really good starting point. Yeah, if you want to go cheap, I haven't seen anything cheaper yet for something that actually works. So.
Most importantly, is mom. She's pretty happy.
Yeah, she likes it, so it works, right? So.
Right.
More questions, guys? Well, hey, thank you, Ben.
Thanks, guys.
So, hey, yeah, definitely hang out as long as you guys want. Please help us with the food and the brownies and Rice Krispies if they're still available. And I think next month we'll probably be doing either Docker or Vagrant, most likely Docker. We'll update the Meetup invites, and thanks for coming out, and yeah, hang out, and we'll see you.
Vagrant. Really? All right. Sorry.
Watchman bid fight over a Vagrant.
No, it was a boot. That wasn't a new. But okay. No,
Okay.
I'm kidding.
No, what's Vagrant meant for, you know?
Well,
Development
devs.
environments
Yeah,
is
that's
what it's
true.
meant for.
That's
So
true.
it's completely opposite of this.
I know. So behind your Lambda is Docker containers, right? You're running your containers on a giant fleet. That's how it's cheap. But you're right. It is a different use case.
It's a lot more sense now. We got on Twitter and stuff.
Okay.
We talked about people using Lambda for their web app. Seems to compile the page as the user scrolls. And it didn't really make sense. They're like, yeah, this is faster than trying to once you get requests. You can just get the compiled page from the
Really?
browser through Lambda function. That would be like what the whole thing. It's like, oh, that's
That's cool. That's a better use case. That's cool.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, and it integrates really well with any of the other services, right? So you have full access to the SDK. So if you wanted to run Elasticsearch and have some crazy document store and maybe just ping Elasticsearch, get some aggregations back, that's completely doable. So yeah, it's powerful. They're really pushing it, and I can see them starting to deprecate EC2 service. I mean, not deprecate it, but they're pushing you towards their just run containers in our system. They're definitely pushing people towards Lambda now. So, all right, cool. No problem. Good. All right. Cool.
I got a feeling Chris is going to try to do something.
Yeah,
with
I
this,
think like that. That was.
I think I learned a lot from that.
You like that?
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, we're also building end-to-end.
So does it have a name yet, or what's going on?
We have
Oh.
a bunch of images that
I call it the queue runner.
I was thinking
All right.
display those
Specifically
images
because
that
everyone runs the queue advanced.
There you
Okay,
go.
all right.
There you go. Yeah, just say, oh,
I've
is this then?
been working on.
Then you can have render that for
creating a
you.
new because a while ago.
Okay. And then how are you trying to render them some other point or?
So I've been learning laser cutting. I've also been able to illustrate. and
that
once you're
quickly
based
based on,
on
you
like,
know, what's downloaded
be able to
Yeah. Sure.
the website.
go through and measure.
Okay. Okay, I get what you're asking. That's I'm mostly I'm trying to think of how to. I feel like I haven't tried to push like an image data stream through this thing, so I can't. So, I mean, clearly you've got the uploaded points to work, but I feel like there's definitely a function
So,
to
yeah.
say, all right, if user this, then here, you know, then this image, but I don't know. You stuck? So you are stuck, or you're not stuck? You're just inspired. Right?
Across
I
like
think so. I mean, I did look into this service before.
Right. So that's just cheap hosting, right? So if your app can just,
So for the most
if you
part,
can just serve up HTML or you know an index.html, that's just cheap hosting with a worldwide distribution on top of that. So it does do that pretty well. And the fake domain, right? The cheap domain and then the cheap fake domain. It's a create aliasing. Like I said, for a DNS service, I found to be easy to work with.
But we got continuous video there, we got to convince you.
but
Hey Brian,
Sorry.
I need to stop the recording, please. Sorry.
Sure. So actually, at
Good call, man.
our
Yeah.
business, we use that container service.
I want to check his crap out.
But again, bring it